just like to start by thanking Pam, the organiser, for inviting me back and for everyone being here today. And I want to start by way of apology, because the images aren't as varied or as great as they normally would be. If you've been looking at the news, we have had a significant cyber attack that's taken down some of our infrastructure, so scanning and copying has been a challenge. But we're on the mend, we'll get there. So I'm taking a slightly different approach to Jonathan. I mean, he took all the best stuff, you know, and the best slot. So I'm here today really to do three things, which is to explain what the British Library is, what we have in terms of banknotes, and more importantly for you, the audience, how do you get your hands on it? So without further ado, I'd like to just start off. So the British Library itself was formed 50 years ago last year by Act of Parliament, and that Act of Parliament brought together over 18 different research libraries together into a single organisation that eventually moved into purpose-built premises in St Pancras, where we now operate. As a result of that kind of custodial history of the various collections, our banknotes are actually scattered throughout different parts of the library. It's estimated we have about 6,000 banknotes in total, and as you can see from this very scrappy bit of paper here, it starts from some of the earliest banknotes from the Yuan dynasty, this Yuan dynasty Fei Qian, right the way through to the late 20th century. They're global in coverage. Some areas are much better represented than others, and other areas we don't have them. And what we have in the collection is material relating to all aspects of the security printing processes, particularly for the 20th century. So there's a lot of unique material there, and there's a lot of unique, a lot of one-offs, as Jonathan alluded to just a few minutes ago. We differ from the holdings of the money and medals at the British Museum in one way, in that our material is strictly archival. So, when you talk to us about Unc and all the rest, doesn't necessarily mean the same thing to us, because ours are actually working documents, they're archival working documents, they're annotated on, and they're fiddled, but they're still a wonderful source. So at present, I'm going to talk today about some of the areas we're finding more and more paper money in our collections all the time. So there's always new finds and stuff being found in new collections, which I can't yet tell you about. And they're divided into kind of four main areas. So the major paper money holdings are in my department, which is the Philatelic Collections. For those who aren't aware of who we are, that's the stamps. We're better known as a stamp archive, but we have much more than that. And within the Philatelic Collections, our paper money is currently divided into kind of 6 main areas. So we have the Perkins-Bacon paper money collection, the Board of Inland Revenue Stamping Department archive, the Crown Agent's Philatelic and Security Printing archive, the general collection, which is an amalgamation of small donations. We keep their provenance intact, but they're not quite big enough to form archives on their own. The Foreign and Commonwealth Office collection. And then outside of the department, which kind of got me into the philatelic department, was when I was cataloguing, someone said to me about 12 years ago, "Richard, can you catalogue the financial department records?" And I was like, yeah, all right then. But as I was doing it, literally, Indian rupee notes were falling out of the files. 10,000 rupee, 1899 issue cancelled. Everything at Zanzibar in the India office, yeah. And that's the second largest collection. That's about 1,000 banknotes and various other artefacts. The Chinese section, of course, has the Yuan dynasty note, which you saw, several Ming dynasty notes, and some early Qing material, very small. And then we're also finding in the printed heritage, that printed book collection, we're finding kind of colonial American notes, Mafeking notes, like a whole range of things that are just turning up all the time. And there, of course, is the site where you can come and visit. So to go to the first collection, philatelists know of Perkins-Bacon because essentially it's world famous for philatelists for producing the first ever adhesive postage stamp, the penny black here. We have the original Perkins Bacon D-cylinder press, which is on public display, which of course would have been involved in early paper money production. But in addition to that, in the archive, we have a collection of about 60 plate proofs for Perkins Bacon. I've broken down by kind of country here the kind of number of essays or proofs or specimens that we have. And you can see it's a very good coverage from kind of working for America, Australia, South America, England, Europe. You know, it's a good range of material, and there's a lot of unique material in this collection. So as you can see here, we have an unissued Bank of Bombay 1858 1,000 rupee note. Of course, the variation here you'll notice is on the coat of arms, which doesn't exist, and the reason why that never went into circulation, of course, was the Indian mutiny / First War of Independence, and of course you begin to get the first series of currency notes in 1861, followed by the $10 Penang plate proof. You'll notice on the bottom here we have annotations. These are the original printer's annotations. They're in pencil, so they don't come out too clearly. And that's what I mean. You can see here how these are working documents rather than banknote collection. It's archival. One collection that's less obvious for people is the Board of Inland Revenue Stamping Department archive. So the Stamp Office, or what became the Board of Inland Revenue, was established the same year as the Bank of England to deal with kind of raising revenues for the war against Louis XIV from France. So think of your stamp duty. So this is the origins of it. And it was, like, say, part of those wider financial reforms which led to the creation of our national debt and so on. So not only do you have that tied kind of financial history for notes, we actually do have material in here of significance. So we have a range of kind of embossed revenue stamps. This was used on bills exchange, but we also have stuff that was used, the stamps for provincial banknotes. We have the original archive for that. But we're also lucky enough to have the archive for the treasury notes. We've got entire sheets that are uncut of Bradburys and stuff. This is only a small sample here. Like I said, I've had problems with image, but the sheets are absolutely enormous. And we're also very lucky enough to have the packing books. There's about 200 volumes, which one of our colleagues, Tim, went through and solved the Dardanelles kind of mystery a few years ago, which I'm not going to repeat or steal his thunder, but I recommend his article. And it shows that kind of wider kind of connection that, you know, we tend to divide our lane. You're a stamp collector, you're a banknote collector. Actually, there are more synergies than there are things that keep us apart. Moving on, probably the biggest paper money archive in the library is the Crown Agents. The Crown Agents was it was actually an individual set up in the early 18th century that dealt with financial transactions for the Crown, basically between the colonies and so on. But as the British Empire expanded in the 19th century, the Colonial Office really began to struggle with the provision of infrastructure for their settlements. So things like bridges, uniforms, and over time, stamps and paper money. We have in our collection, in this archive, we have the complete archive of the Crown Agents that was essentially a middle person between the Colonial Office and the security printers. It's a vast archive. So, and the reason why we have it is that predominantly it's philatelic, but we have, like I say, the paper money. We also have the postal orders and various other things in there, and you can measure it in linear meters to give you an idea. So for the philately, we have 60,000 original works of art. So this is the Uganda, this is the 2 shilling stamp for the Independence issue, designed by Victor Whiteley. It's a watercolour, and we have the original, often we have the original research material that the artist would develop from. With regards to our holdings, again, we have a range of material. So we have, for example, here the George V, we have an essay for the 10 shilling, followed with kind of plate proof here for the government of Gibraltar. Barbados colour trial, and here an unissued Bahamas £1 note. Of course, the late monarch died and his daughter took over, hence it was unissued. So a whole range, of various parts of the manufacturing process, and of course stuff like this is incredibly rare, unique. So in terms of coverage, the Paper Money Archive covers in excess of about 70-80 countries, which I've roughly broken down here. So, for example, here we have the various issuing authorities and rough date ranges of the archives for Turks and Caicos, Leeward Islands, St Lucia. Here I've got some examples to show you. You'll notice at the bottom again, you'll see the annotations. So this has been approved and the date of approval, which is really useful. So you can begin to tell when there's changes to notes or when things are developing. Moving onwards, of course, then, we have more countries here. So there's some Zanzibar, there's a 500. Did you show that one? It wasn't that one, was it?
No, that's the later one.
That's the later one. Well, there you go, but it wasn't in your presentation, so I did have something else to say. And then feeding in, by pure coincidence, quite nice, we have some of the East African material here. So here's the 10,000 note. And then moving through, we have loads of rarities. So, for example, the Palestine 100, the Straits settlement. I haven't had time to check this, and I'm not got notes. I'm run off my head, but I think this is the one with the date that everyone kind of craves. I could be wrong, but it gives you an idea. It's a very vast collection, and very complete for anything that was done by the Crown Agent. So, we've got some amazing material there in kind of for Singapore, for the Straits. Well worth looking at our Malaya material, the Iraq and Palestine, as well as our Zanzibar is. You could have great fun with it, and you'll notice there's a whole range of. So you'll notice at the top here, something we'll come back to later. There's an alphanumeric code often that will come in later. We can use these in many instances to work out the print runs, what was printed when with what serial numbers in our requisitions book. So in addition to the notes, specimen notes, we have what are known as the Crown Agent's requisition books. That will list not just paper money, but also the stamps, anything that they were manufacturing. It'll often include changes to the notes, the serial numbers, the quantities printed. So you can really begin to build a nice picture of what was being issued when. Here's an example of one. For example, so I've taken an entry, so I've used the number at the top. I've gone through the Crown Agent's requisitions books. This is a pretty standard layout by this point. You can see the requisition numbers match, then the country, the commodity, the denomination, how many sheets, the serial ranges for each one, when they were shipped out, any notes like signatures or what the changes are. It's not complete, sadly. Jonathan, as he said, Jonathan's a great researcher. He's one of my regulars, solid researcher. Came in. Sadly, we didn't have anything for the Zanzibar notes. Quite frustrating, wasn't it? It was a bit disappointing. So these books start from about 1921, 22, and they go up to about 1969. The early and later periods of the books, the quality of entries can be a bit more sporadic, but they're a pretty solid set, And of course, what's interesting about this note is that it mentions here that the set was lost at sea. So all of a sudden, what looks fairly common can become much rarer. So if you're looking at certain serial numbers, you can really work out the rarity of your print run. That you can go that granular. I think that's really cool and exciting. Moving on now to our general collection. So these are some of the smaller collections we've got. To be honest, I'm still working out the provenance of this body of material, but we have a good run of Delarue specimen material with a few issued stamps. Sadly, all I've got here at the minute are the Southeast Asian ones, but of course there's a whole range of like European. So this is Bulgarian. There's some circulated Siam. Various for kind of Southeast Asia. I had to cull these from another presentation I did on Southeast Asian banknotes in December. The condition, they're not unk, but again they're archival. They're a completely different creature to the circulated note. One of the nice things in this collection, of course, is that there's a body of vignettes. They're not all paper money vignettes, but I was able to tie this one down, of course, to the straight settlement vignette here. So, you know, there's a bit of work there to be done. There's also stuff from shares. One of the things I should say as well, we do have nice specimens of the signatory proofs and the original signatures for some of the banknotes and the Crown agents as well. So, and we have one example of a plate proof for the Sun Yat-sen issue. Beautiful, really. But I couldn't put it in because getting an image of that when I have the infrastructure is hard enough. Another example of this collection that we have a presentation book, very similar to the Zanzibar in a way, but by this point for the Wiggins Teep and Company paper money specimens. So these are books that are literally there and they're mixed with philatelic content as well as paper money content. Again, it's in addition to kind of these issues, you can see that they're going up to QE2, which, you know, most of the Crown Agent stuff does as well, but there's stuff in there from Ethiopia, England, Australia, various other countries. Small, but it's nice to have examples, not particularly rare, but the context of these is nice because we can begin to see how they're using their printing specimens and looking at the marketing and the way they will pitch to their clients the quality of their work, which is, you know, always worth thinking about. And then various small donations. I mean, the Japanese curator Hamish Todd gave me a wad of the Japanese occupation 1 rupees. And then one of the things I love about philately and paper money, you can tie them in very nicely to the history of diplomacy. They're often given as gifts during official visits. So this Malay 600 rupiah note was donated to the British Library by the ambassador who visited us in about 2018 thereabouts, and we often get the set. So if there are things like banknotes or stamps that are presented as part of a diplomatic visit, we'll often get that set. Again, what's nice about that is it just shows how important these objects are in terms of national iconic objects, but also in terms of their diplomatic value as well. So you can look beyond the note and look at that wider context. Moving on, this was a fairly recent discovery. Sadly, one of my images is missing. I probably deleted it. So I was doing a talk on the British Museum. Our department doesn't have an acquisitions budget. Okay, so all of our 8.5 million collection items are acquired through donation, bequest, or official government transfer. There's one exception, and that's our solidarity collection. So people thinking of Poland in the age of the trade union movement, we were able to get an exemption to redivert our book budget into buying up some of the stamp material. And it transpires as I was doing a talk for the anniversary late last year for the Polish curator, and as I was looking at this pile of stuff, for want of a better word, I came across these, suppose they're skip notes in a way. They're not actually banknotes. So we know that the Solidarity movement would overprint legitimate notes, and for obvious reasons they were taken out, but they're producing these. Now my theory, and it is just a theory at the minute, is that these are being used to raise revenue from the collectors market to help fund the Solidarity movement. So it's a way of using collecting communities to raise revenue to help undermine the communist regime. Although I'm slightly curious about these kind of serial numbers on the back of this. I'm not going to mispronounce his name and embarrass myself. I'm a Londoner. It's not even English, arguably. But, you know, it shows how in some of our collections we're coming across stuff all the time. Another small collection is our Foreign Commonwealth Office collection. Once again, we got this material primarily because it's a stamp collection. It's the official stamp collection of the Foreign and Commonwealth Office. So the bulk of it is stamps, postal stationery, aerograms, what you would expect from the 19th century, right the way up to about the 80s. But it does include a very small collection of paper money. So we've got a small number, there's about 30 notes in total. And you can see like the, you know, small number of British India and Burma. That's the biggest area. So there's about 30 of those, and then a small number for Ceylon from about the 1870s, 79 period, and then a few Cyprus, including the emergency cut issues, the emergency issues. So it's nice. With regards to the notes, it's what one would expect. So there's stuff there from every denomination from the 20th century. So, every issue, included from the uniface, like kind of from about the 1920s, right the way up to kind of the early Reserve Bank of India of George VI, and there's every denomination. So you can see here, just as a range, we've got some of the 10,000 rupees, some of the 100s, 5 rupees, in no particular order. And these were literally an official reference copy. And I've gone light on this because of the next archive, which of course is the India Office records. Now, I'm quite lucky. I've spent 10 years in the philatelic department, but like I said, I spent 10 years in this department before transferring over. So the India Office records are, they take up about 9 kilometres of shelf space. And they're, despite the monolithic sounding name, it's a really complex accumulation of archival material from various institutions. So the early material, of course, is the various East India, so the London East India Company, the English East India Company, the United East India Company, which of course is Clive of India and the beginnings of empire, and then followed by a government department called the Board of Commissioners for the Affairs of India that was set up by Pitt the Younger, because the way the company mismanaged their empire led to the collapse of the Fox North coalition. They were outed, and you know, Pitt the Younger was put in, and so this was a big department set up. Later on, after the kind of War of Independence / mutiny, the East India Company ceases to exist formally. The British government takes over the direct administration of India, and they merge to form the India Office, and then later on you get an offshoot of the Burma Office, okay? And those records, they roughly end about 1948, and they cover all of English activity east of the Cape of Good Hope to the Straits of Magellan from 1600 to 1950, so 400 years of records of all types of material, very important. It includes the paper money archive for the government of India from about the First World War period on to the beginnings of when India starts to manufacture its own paper money about the 1930s. So there's around 100 original specimens in here, and 1,000 original specimens and artifacts in here. What's lovely about this collection is, in addition to the notes, we have all of the correspondence, all of the files. It's a very different animal. So we're currently going through a process of extracting the notes from the files to make them more easy to locate and use. At the minute, they're situated in the files. So it's a matter of working through file by file. And there's over, like say, 100 files. So here I've got an example of just some of them. You'll notice they're covering all manner of things. There's some great correspondence with the Bank of England and portals and lovely disputes in here. But you'll notice the kind of things, so you've got date and of currency notes, kind of inks to be used, washing machines for cleaning the notes to help reduce counterfeiting. One file that we're going to come back to is this file here, LF7354, Preventing the Practice at Home and Abroad and Proposals for the Improvement of Notes. I've done a lecture on this, I think at the last talk or one before, so I'm not going to go over the ground, but an example of, during the First World War, the India Office collaborates with the Colonial Office, the Home Office and the Foreign Office to pull together banknotes to create the first pictorial George V series around the time of the First World War. What we have here is one of the file records, so it's the letter sent from the Under Secretary of State to the Under Secretary of State to the Colonial Office from the India Office saying, oh, could you get hold of all your issuing authorities? Could you get specimen notes for us? So it means that in addition to kind of the India notes, I don't know what's going on with my images, sorry. In addition to the India notes, we have a worldwide collection from around the time of the First World War. That includes, of course, kind of some English notes. What was here, sadly, isn't here, is the $50,000 Canadian note, the £1,000 Australian notes. We've got several of those. I couldn't resist the German, you know, the link. This is an ode to Jonathan. It's a German banknote from China. So, you know, looking at your career. And then kind of Scottish, kind of Ottoman and other areas. I'm not sure why the images have not come up, but take my word for it. It's a quite an amazing collection. And yeah, there's something really weird going on with this. Again, in terms of unique material, we have the original McKennell bust that was used to produce the portrait for the first series of notes. We had the cardboard essay here, which has disappeared, and I also have some of the unissued, so the purple, the uniface issue with the purple overprint from 1911 that was never issued. You know, and then various other issues that the only copies are at the library. I've got a suspicion the file's corrupted as I've transferred it from my computer to my USB. In terms of other collections, what was shown here was a Ming Dynasty note from the Chinese collection, and then very circulated, very tattered colonial note. So this is, I haven't got my glasses on, but this is an American note, $4 bill for Maryland. Yep, thank you. You know, from about 1764. So we've got sets of those. But I also want to kind of take it a bit further. So in addition to other parts of the library, there are other types of paper money. We have, I shouldn't really tell you about these, but we've got about 100 Chinese bonds in the Chinese section. We've got a range of bond and share certificates. We don't, like I say, stamps, banknotes, bonds, they're not covered by the legal deposit, so we don't get them, okay? This, to me, we've got banknote archives, we've got paper money archives, which are great. I'm deeply concerned that there's no institutional archive of bond certificates and share certificates, because you can't understand modernity without these. You want to understand the role of money and climate change. You want, you know, in terms of that curation, those subject curations, bringing this subject to life, this kind of material is a real kind of outsider. I mean, you know, and there's some great stuff out there. I mean, if I could afford it, I'd be well up for it. Now, so you've had a rough idea, so I've kept the first part of my promise, which is told you who we are. You've got a slight inkling of what I've got, or what we've got, I should say. Sorry, Jonathan, sorry, Richard. Now the question is, how do you get your hands on it? Well, actually, we have two ways of accessing this collection. One way you can't touch it, but you can get very close, of course, is on the upper ground floor of the St Pancras building. We have 10 cases, which comprises a 1,000-frame exhibition. This lady's looking at our Polish postal history collection, our Bojanowicz here, so not banknotes, because I don't know why, but anyway. But in the first case, you'll find most of the major issues of the Crown Agent's material are there. And you can access that without appointment anytime you want, as long as the building's open. You can just come and have a look. In addition to that public display, we try to get some of our material wherever possible into the mainstream exhibitions. I'm having more success with our stampage. I've actually colonised the Treasures Gallery with stamps. So you go to the music section, there's music stamps. You go to the science bit, there's NHS stamps. You go to the Bangladesh community bit, there's Bangladesh stamps. There's going to be stuff in the Black British Music stamp, and I want banknotes. Somehow I'm going to get a banknote into the medieval, and I know I've made it big time when I'm in the medieval manuscripts area, so watch this space. People who would like to come and research the collection, you can do so. It's free of charge. All you're going to need is a valid reader's pass, and you can obtain one of them by just coming in off the street, literally, with 3 bits of ID. So photographic ID, proof of address, proof of signature. Takes about 15 minutes to do an online form, and they'll issue, well, maybe a bit longer because of the hack, but we're starting to reissue passes, and then once you got that pass, it will let you into the reading rooms, and you can go into the main reading rooms. Now, our reading room's slightly different, with a high security reading room in the library, so it's one-on-one invigilation. That's my reading room. Where others have 100 readers, I have a maximum of 2, which makes you probably want to ask me, well, why the hell are they all there? We also do group visits, and we had these Americans coming over, so we pulled out the 1765 stamps, the stamps that caused the American Revolution, and that's why they're all looking very keen. All you need to do once you've got your pass is email us, give us as much notice because it's first come, first served. We'll book you an appointment, we'll arrange to come and pick you up, and then you can come and use the material. We don't currently have any imaging services yet for the public nor for the staff, so watch this space. One of the other things I would say is that one of the nice things about being in the British Library is that there's a wealth of complementary collections. So, you know, the patent library is going to have some very interesting stuff on printing techniques and so on. And then when you're looking at kind of wider contextualization, you know, we've got a lot of material that brings that history and that story of these notes to life. I'm going to leave it there, and thank you very much. And I'm really sorry that the file corrupted. I thought it was fine this morning, but I hope it didn't spoil it too much for you. Thank you. Cheers. Has anyone got any questions for me? Andrew?
Just two vaguely technical. The Crown Agent stuff's only British imperial or colonial stuff, isn't it? It's not everything else done by the British printers?
No, so you were asking me, just for the purpose of the microphone, you were asking me whether it's just British colonial or Commonwealth material. The vast bulk of it certainly is British Commonwealth. There are one or two exceptions, but it's not everything that they're printing. It's everything they're printing for the Crown Agents. So hence there are big gaps, especially for someone like De La Rue who are printing for like everyone. But there may be stuff in other archives. So like one collection I can't divulge yet, it's actually a collection of Cinderella stamps, and I'm finding a lot of interesting emergency issues for the Russian Revolution in it. So they look more like stamps, to be fair, but you know. So we're always growing and expanding that collection.
And the requisition numbers, they're your own numbers that we put on when, or the Crown Agents numbers, right?
Yeah, they're the Crown Agents numbers. So these are very similar in respect to the De La Rue Day books. The difference is it's just the Crown Agents copies, but that number won't correlate with the De La Rue because it's a different archive. So yeah. Jonathan.
Yeah, Richard, I've got to ask this. Can we expect one day, maybe, that the British Library will put on an exhibition of the history of printing and indeed security printing? Because you've got everything from big notes through to, you know, today.
The answer to that question, so you were asking me whether we'll ever put on a major Treasures Gallery exhibition on security printing and money. The answer to that question is yes, I would very much like to. The question is one of curation rather than content. So when you have a major BL exhibition in the Treasures Gallery, they've reduced the size of those major exhibition areas, but it's still 120 objects is the going number. Now, of course, for big manuscripts, that's fine, you know, when you're dealing with, but if you're dealing with things like stamps, banknotes, it's much smaller. So I've certainly got something in the pipeline, but the last few years, sadly, the last few years at the library have been a challenge. We've had the global pandemic, and then 6 months ago we had this cyber attack, and actually I can do less now than I could in the lockdown, which is odd, although it's getting better. So I didn't have email for a few months. We are getting there. So we were working on metadata to get these banknotes online. Some of that metadata you could have accessed on our Archives and Manuscripts catalogue, and we were hoping at the beginning of the year, of course, to have had things like the Perkins-Bacon collection digitised and online. The images are there, the metadata's there, the platform isn't now, but it was. So we were literally in the final stages to start getting the first online. I'd like to do something. I think it's going to be a mixture of, rather than just our material to make this work, we're probably going to have to work with other organisations, We're going to have to work with other parts of the collection and work out ways to deal with the space to make an exhibition that doesn't overwhelm the public. But yes, I'd certainly like to. And if you've got any ideas, please get in touch. I'll take them on board.
I will.
Cheers. Hiya.
Good morning. Are you managing to avoid the woke situation of the Anglo-Chinese Museum, the V&A Museum and all the others? Any pressures to change the whole attitude of the library? There's
a lot of change happening in the cultural sector as a whole. We are going through some of those changes. The line I take personally is we're funded by the taxpayer, which means we're here for everyone. But I've always tried to curate material to be diverse and inclusive in an apolitical way. So I've always, you look at some of my blogs, they've looked at things like Chinese refugees in Georgian Britain, and really, if you're curating well, see, for me, I have traditional audiences, but in a world where resources are becoming more and more competitive, we need to expand. So we're always looking to ways to expand our audiences, and that's certainly the case with our department. So, for example, when I was alluding to things like the share certificates, the stock certificates, the banknotes, we need to make our subject future-proof, make it that youngsters want to engage with it. But we've always really, as a department, done that, because unlike, say, the coins and medals or the Royal Philatelic Society, they're very specialised departments with kind of core audience, which we have too. But we're part of a much bigger organisation, which means that we've always had to look beyond our traditional audiences. So I suppose what I'm trying to say is that we are diverse, but we're not necessarily tied into any political aspects of that diversity.
Thanks very much.
Yep.
Yeah, Richard,
You're right.
to belabor the point, what's it going to take to get the stamp department to relinquish a couple of panels for exhibits of banknotes? A letter from the Prime Minister, or what? Is there anything the IPNS can do to leverage this?
So you're asking whether there's ways to relinquish parts of the collection. I can appreciate that there's a balance between having stuff at market to keep the collecting alive, but there's also a case that significant material should be institutionalised. I mean, take for example our major Zanzibar rarity. If that was in private hands right now, if it was out on the market, you'd need to have two things to access it. You'd either need to be very rich to buy it, or very rich, or know someone very rich to own it. The good thing about some of this material on site is anyone can access it, and it's maintained in the best preservation conditions, so temperature, relative humidity, security. One of the things I'd say about the British Library, donations, we respect the archival integrity, so any donations we get are named after the donor, and we're a bit like Hotel California, so you can check in any time you want, but you can never leave. So, it's a... Hey.
Enjoyed your presentation, thank you very much.
Oh, thank you.
I was just in regards to Bruce's question, I was saying, there's the exhibit of all the philately that you can pull the panels.
Yes.
I think in light of what I was saying, what Bruce was saying, is will there be panels in the future that would have banknotes and just philately?
There already are. There's a whole case. You've got a whole case. So that's 100. That's 100 sheets, 100 boards, four to a sheet. So you've got in excess of 600-700 specimen notes on display, on permanent display. We do normally turn them over. The paper money being a much smaller part of our collection. I mean, we're numbering it in the thousands. You've got to remember my collection's in the millions. We won't be able to turn it over in the same way we do other collection items. And actually, the cases are overdue a turnaround because of, the pandemic and so on. So I'm trying to think of ways that we can perhaps freshen it up a bit. You know, the material's great. What I'd like is that rather than just pull it out and go, oh, there's a banknote, there's another banknote, do something a bit more interpretive with it. Maybe take it off at times and then instead do more regional collection focus, more technical stuff that we're enabled to do that. Maybe even, I'm going to be radical here and it's not authorised, so don't take my word for it, but maybe even co-curate. I mean, I'm the generalist, so I look at the collection and I have my own interests, but of course you have the fine detail. And as you become acquainted with our collections, you might have ideas and way we can curate it in a safe, secure way to make it more relevant to your audience. So there's a whole range of ways we could do this. I mean, I've got ideas and plans for the collection, its digitisation, and like I say, I definitely want to try and work out ways to acquire stock and bond certificates, because, yeah, 100%. One of the things I would say, actually, before you go, you know what I did love about the cases, so, and Jonathan, I'm being a bit naughty here. I had a big wig from the 4th floor, so that's the executive floor at the library. Jonathan knows it well. It's like they're all very nice. Anyway, one day we had an official come down from the 4th floor, and Richard's from the 4th floor as well. Yeah, sorry, Richard. Yeah. He's stuck with me at the minute. But we were giving him a tour, and I happened to show him the cases of paper money, and to my absolute delight and horror, I was finding that members of the public weren't just enjoying the exhibition, they were hinging banknotes onto the glass. So they would donate, they were co-curating. So I had circulated notes from Hong Kong, no major rarity, but people were coming in, opening it, going, oh, you haven't got this note, and hinged it. So it was lovely because it was a lovely act of co-curation. It was generous donation, but it was also a minor act of vandalism. But it was quite nice to show that people don't just equate with stamps, banknotes, and these objects in terms of their cultural. It's an emotional connection. And that's the thing, people, you know, it triggers nostalgia, memory. These are very powerful objects, very powerful. And I was quite proud of that. And it was nice to show it to some of the senior staff. So, yeah, anyway.
Right, I'm just going to say thank you very much. You can blame me for inviting Richard along today, but I've had a connection with the British Library. It doesn't go back quite as far as his, but it's, I mean, I think he brings perspective to, you know, the paper money is such a tiny part of the British Library as a whole, but he brings a perspective to, you know, owning paper money, looking at paper money and putting it into that wider context of financial and indeed political history. You can go in there is a frame you can pull out and you can see all 7 types of Zanzibar notes. So they're all there, they're on permanent display, and they're all those philatelic frames are there. At the very beginning, there's about 50 frames of banknotes, and it's mostly from the Crown Agent's archive, so it's British territories over the years, A to Z. But Richard, thank you so much. It was a fascinating talk. I'm delighted that the British Library is getting, you know, a little bit more recognition. It's obviously had a terrible time with the cyber attack, but you're now getting over that. And I hope you get plenty more people coming in to see all this material, because it is wonderful. And Richard has just given you a tiny bit of an insight into what is there, and he's only less than half a mile away. So, you know, you've got no excuse. Thank you very much.
Thank you.